welcome to our webinar on leading through change. I'd like to wish you good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be joining us from in the world today. I hope you're all healthy and safe and in the mood to hear us discuss leading through change in the finance organisation and beyond. So by now, you should all see slides on the screen and a video link from our office here in the Netherlands. My name is Jennifer Loughridge, and I'm the Principal Consultant from Loughridge Transformations. So let me say a few words of introduction for those of you who might be joining our webinars for the first time. As I said, my name's Jennifer, and I'm a finance professional by background. I specialise in finance transformation and continuous improvement, and that's been my passion in recent years of my career. Loughridge Transformations is a boutique consulting firm, and we specialise in delivering functional improvements and transformation which positively impact the bottom line and the organisational culture. We're based between the UK and the Netherlands, but we have clients globally. So, on our next slide, we have the question of the hour, the one that drew your attention to the webinar in the first place. How can leaders make change happen and deliver value? So in this webinar, we'll be discussing three things. One, there's no right or wrong decision in uncertain times. Two, that scanning the territory externally and internally is powerful. And three, your view of what a good leader is will probably be turned right upside down. So today I'm thrilled to have a guest speaker join us, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Tessa. Tessa and I share a corporate background, but we actually got to know each other mainly over the last couple of years as we've been sharing our journeys as entrepreneurs and consultants. Now, as everyone most likely knows, the last couple of years hasn't really been the easiest time to forge new relationships. Still, in the most restricted days of the pandemic, Tessa and I started by meeting up while walking in the park, and sometimes we were joined by her puppy, who's not so much a puppy anymore, got bigger every time, and then eventually, like today, we got to meet up indoors. So given that I've worked with change and transformational change for some years now, obviously I've worked with a number of specialists in change and in organisational effectiveness. Today, though, I'm really pleased to have Tessa join us because I really enjoy her blend of the creative together with analytical when it comes to diagnosing and solving problems. And I know she's also the kind of person who just gets stuff done. Next to that, I love her vibrant and positive energy, and it makes it a lot of fun to work together. So welcome, Tessa.
Thank you.
Maybe you want to say a few words.
Yeah, hello there, everybody. My name is Tessa. It's hard to introduce yourself after such nice words, Jennifer. I have over 2 decades worth of HR experience all around the world. I worked for a big corporate, and that led me to work in Nigeria and Malaysia, and I spent some time in the US, but I also had lots of clients in the Middle East. So I think we can say I've been globally around the HR block a bit. And thank you for having me here.
Great. Now it's good to hear a little of your global experience. I've also worked around the place, and I think judging by the registered participants today, we've probably got people from all corners of the world.
That's great.
Right, I think we can get started with our first theme for today, and that is people support what they help to develop. Should have a slide with that little slogan. Yes, there we are. So people support what they help to develop. Tessa, let's start with hearing from you why you find that so critical.
Yeah, I think it's good to place it a bit into context. You know, about a decade ago, I got really interested in change and transformation. And I got interested because I saw a lot of change projects happening around me that maybe didn't get the full value of what people had set out to do, and that intrigued me. You know, there were smart people working the change. There was a vision on what that change had to be. There was proper project planning, and still it didn't work. Right. And this was sort of when I started on my journey, when I found out, hey, people support what they help to develop. And what I mean with that is that the more complicated the changes get, and we'll get into complicated or simple a bit later, is that the more complicated they get, the more you need the people around you to contribute and be involved in the change. So when we say you need to engage people or involve people in the change, then we said we might get a little bit controversial, we'll turn things upside down, is for me, engagement is not having a town hall and saying what's going to happen on a complicated change. For me, engaging is really taking people along and letting them influence part of the change.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think we've all seen town halls, newsletters, posters on walls. I think that's a little bit old style, maybe. It's a very one-way style of communicating. And I guess what you're talking about is much more two-way. So do you want to give us a little bit of example of what that could look like?
I thought about that, but when I was driving up here, I thought it might be an idea to give a nice example on a finance change, right? So I'm assuming that when there's finance transformation, I'm thinking of things like outsourcing or outsource is probably a good one. I think it's good as a leader that you're honest about where can you involve people in and where not. So the fact that you're going to outsource, that decision is going to be made somewhere at an appropriate level so that people cannot influence. But how you're going to outsource or what the process is going to be like, that is something that people can influence. So if you think, for example, about, let's say you outsource to another country, then how people are going to be working together and a behavior that you're going to need, which is collaboration over international lines, for example. That is something that you could really use your people's input on.
I think it's a good example because, you often talk about motivating people towards the change and that's how you get them along, right? But the challenge with some aspects of transformation, and you've picked a really good finance example there, whether it's outsourcing or offshoring, there will be some people who may lose their jobs. People's jobs may look very different. And it's not that those are changes that it's very easy necessarily to motivate everyone along. So engaging them the way you're saying around collaboration and how it's going to work, I think can be really powerful.
I think it's good for people to know what do I control and what can I not control. Because very often I think people will give their staff a false sense of control. When you do town halls and you ask for input but you don't do anything with it, then you're giving people like a false sense of control, and then what you see is you'll get a lot of pushback or resistance inside the organization.
I think we've all seen examples where feedback's asked for but not really reacted to. So you mentioned town hall feedback. I've also seen examples where there's maybe been a box where you can put something anonymous in, and then actually the project team don't even look at the contents. I mean,
that's like change 101, right?
Exactly.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
No, I think, and it's interesting that you mentioned behaviors, because when we're thinking about organizational design, we always think about three elements, which one is structure. So how does the org actually look? One is skills, and the other is behaviors. And nearly always when you're asked to do org design, people want an org chart, they want names and boxes, right? So that's a given. Sometimes you might get them to think about the capabilities or skills. Quite rarely do you get people to think about the behaviors. And I think exactly in the example that you gave, you need a new set of behaviors to make that transformation actually effective. So it's one that you should pay attention to in my view.
So I normally use like a 4 or 5 box model, right? Where I say there's structure, so the boxes and the wires definitely necessary, right? And then the other one that you probably also do is processes, right? So how is what going to run where? And then I have skills and how many people do you need where? Also often gets looked at. And then I have 2, and they progressively get looked at less. So one is the behavioral part, so what is actually needed, and then the last one is the leadership part, which is what needs to change at the top, inside the leadership team, in order for it to happen.
Good. I think we'll explore that in a minute. So within that, so the next slogan we have is a related one: pay now or pay later. So like a good finance person, I have a monetary one, but I think that's important because quite often people want to skimp a little bit on some of the things we've been talking about and will talk about, but I see that as a real weak investment. Actually, you're not investing in what you need to do. So let's maybe explore that a bit, because I think, well, I know one thing that we have in common is our view that often the technological change, whether that's a process, whether that's actually a new piece of technology, that gets a lot of focus. It's very measurable.
Yes, it's lovely. Yeah.
You can very easily get your green light, traffic lights on that one. But it doesn't really come to getting the right level of utilization and adoption, whether that's processes or tech. And I think a lot of the things that you've just been referring to, they're all in that space. It's the things that happen after the technical go live. And I always like to use that phrase, technical go live. It's not necessarily the same as the go live.
Yeah. And I see it's hard for businesses, and I think we talked about it before, is, you know, when you implement certain changes in your finance organization, especially, you have monthly processes that need to be run.
Right.
So that means that your go live dates are often linked to certain times of the year.
Yeah, and you have just no choice.
Right.
It can also be even external compliance that you must do X and Y and Z. So it's very, very hard timings.
And then what you see is when change projects and change project teams start building their plan, the investment at the front, the pay now part, right?
Yeah.
The pay now part is sometimes hard to get permission for that.
Yeah.
To say these are all the steps that we need to take, and you know, then we have to do something with the soft stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to say what's my return on investment on this. You know, you have all these sessions, but so it's hard to measure.
Yeah, it's not so tangible, and I think it's in cash constrained times, which many organizations surely are these days. That's one of the first things to go.
Yeah, to go. But
let's talk about why that shouldn't be the case and what you should do to overcome that. So let's take an example where, okay, you get it, you understand that you want to do this, but obviously you have either your leadership team or your decision review board or steering committee or however your governance is. You've got a group there who also need to agree with you, or on this point at least. So any sort of tips for how to get people on board?
Get people on board.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the audience, right? So you and I both worked for an engineering company. So I always say, if there's a lot of technical engineering type of people in the room, I like to use a model.
Yeah.
Because it just feels a lot easier to accept. So I use that model that I just spoke about with the 5 items. And so, you know, these are the different elements that are belonging to a change. Now let's map all the things that we have planned.
Right.
And then you will see glaringly empty boxes on the behavior on the leadership side. And then you can kind of go, oh, well, that's really interesting. What do you think we should do there?
I like that, because it's not so much just, okay, I know how to do this, guys, you need to listen to me, but it's actually, let's look really practically, what activities have we organized, and indeed then where are the gaps?
The other thing you could do as well is to say, let's look at previous changes that we've realized, and then what worked well and what didn't go well. And very often the behavioral bit will
jump out. No, I think that's also quite powerful. I mean, it depends what kind of audience you have, like you said, but that sort of a little bit more reflective approach can work very well with some groups, for sure.
Because the whole thing, why I like your statement of pay now or pay later, is that you can either invest it up front, or when you pay later, it means you're not going to get the value out of the change the way you had planned, or it just feels like a really rough ride, because there is either open or behind the scenes resistance, which is very tiring.
Yeah, and I think when we think about change these days, we don't think about change in an isolated thing and then it's some time before we have change again. No, it's change upon change and upon change. And if you've had some of those kind of not so good feeling changes, it weakens your ability to do the next change and the next change. It's very cumulative. So getting it right, it doesn't only cost you in the efficacy of what you're doing right now, it will also cost you in the longer term, I think.
It's more engaged, because you can see that, right? Most larger companies have some kind of engagement survey.
Right.
So a more engaged staff is a more productive staff.
Yeah,
so
you see
you
that.
would be hurting yourself if you wouldn't do this properly, I would say, right?
Yeah, indeed. The other thing I like about what you just said on, you know, asking people to reflect, look at changes that have happened before and what has worked or what not, that can also be something that you do once you've done it with the leadership group and you've kind of got their buy-in to it, but do that then with the wider organization, because that can be quite a nice way to gain people's inputs as well.
Also, because what happens a lot is that you know, when there's, for example, the outsourcing or you get the project team often is very senior.
Yeah.
But it's been a while since you've done the actual work.
Yes.
So then to determine what is going where and how easy or difficult that's going to be, it's good to involve the people that are really doing the work, because they actually know.
Process operators are your process experts.
Yeah.
No, indeed, I think it's you need to gain that specific knowledge from on the floor.
Yeah.
We would call it a go-see.
Yeah.
In our tech language. Yeah. Good. All right. Now I think maybe we can move on to our next topic, or these build on it. So we were talking about tips for leaders, and I think this model that you brought along with us is kind of in that space, right? Would you like to talk us through that one?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this. So this is the Stacy model, and the reason that I like bringing models is, first of all, I have a technical background and I worked in a technical company, and I like things that are steeped in analysis and data, because that makes it very practical for me. So when you go through a change, so I'm assuming there's people on the call that are thinking about changing their organization, or whether that's finance or not finance. One of the things that is good is to spend some time thinking. And as I say, thinking is also working. So it's good to take time to think.
Absolutely.
And then the question would be, first we would look externally. So if you're heading into a change, so whether that's energy transition, or do I outsource or not, or do I grow, is to look at this model that will give you two axes. The horizontal axis is about, it's called certainty, but it has to do with, have you done this before? So if it's on the left-hand side, I'm very close to certain that the approach that I have is going to work, because I've done it a million times before.
Right.
So for example, if, we both come from an organization that drills well, if you drill a lot of wells on land and you drill 100 of them a year, you're pretty sure that, this is what you do. Whereas, for example, energy transition, we've never done this before. No. We don't know how this is going to work. So that's one axis to look at. And the other axis has to do with, are the stakeholders around this change actually aligned or not? So at the top, less aligned, at the bottom, more aligned. So basically you see that this matrix has 4 different areas. The area at the bottom left is the simple area. It means we've done this before, and everybody is aligned on that we have to do this. Simple. So for example, if you have from a finance perspective, there is something compliant, there's some kind of tax change, or a
simple process change that is a given that you must do it, right?
We've done something like that before. Everybody's aligned, we have to do it. Simple change. For a simple change, I don't think you need to engage people to the level that I was talking about. It has to happen. These are the reasons. Then complicated can have 2 axes, which is you've either never done it before, or people are actually not so aligned. And when that happens, it becomes really interesting depending on where you are. So if people are not aligned, you should really try and work hard to get people aligned. And if things have never been done before, you will start by looking at companies that have done something like this before, or getting experts in, like yourself or myself, that have done something like that before.
And I guess some sort of the digital transformation things are in that space, whether it's about a certain kind of automation, or whether it's about making your organization more data driven. To your point, people are probably clear that's what we want to do, but they haven't done it before, because you wouldn't need to do it if you'd already done it. So as a given, it's new, and I think gathering some expertise can be helpful, and yet indeed reflecting on using a model like this.
And then getting your people involved could also be at that. So if you're more on the vertical axis, alignment, you just need to obtain that in some shape or form. When you get more to the I haven't done it before, that's when you can get a lot of people's views in, because you haven't done it and they haven't done it, but we could use our collective brain power to get some idea on how to do it. And then the darker orange bit on the upper right, that has to do with, this is big, right? It's energy transition. We've never done something like this before. We know we want to get there. No clue on how. This feels very, very, very uncomfortable. That's really complex.
So I guess from what you're saying, further to the top right you go on this one, actually also the more complicated it is for the leader. So talking about leading through change, it's not just, is the project more complex? Clearly, but also what does that mean for the actual leader?
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk a little bit about how a leader can approach that.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that is really interesting is you can use this tool to figure out yourself where you are as a leader. What's really interesting is sitting down with your people to figure out where they are.
Yeah.
Maybe for me it seems simple, but for you it seems complicated or even complex, right?
Yeah, and I think the larger the organization that you're leading, the more that is the case, because I mean, you do become a little bit more out of touch the higher up the ranks you go, right? So, or the bigger your organization is, you just can't have that sort of intimacy that you might have with a smaller team.
Yeah.
And some of the changes that we're talking about are often kind of quite broad in their scale. Right?
Yeah. And it's hard, right? Let's be honest, leaders out there, it's hard to be a leader because you have to be everything nowadays. You have to be a strong leader and vulnerable, and so there's all these things that people are expecting of you. And I also think there's this thing, maybe to explain, it's called top, middle, and bottom. So once your organization reaches a certain size, there will be certain behaviors and views within your organization. It happens with everybody.
Yeah.
So at the top, you feel super responsible and you want to set the strategy. But when there's customers or there's things that you want, you're not quite sure what the capability totally in your organization is because it's very large.
For me, yeah.
When you're at the bottom, you look at the top and you go, those guys have lost touch so long ago. They don't know what's really happening on the floor. And there's a bit of, unhappiness. And then the middle is horribly stuck. The middle feels like they're being squeezed by questions from the bottom and then demands from the top. So the middle should always try to align amongst themselves because that's where their power is.
I'm a big fan of dedicating some thought in your project plan to that middle layer, because I think, like you say, they're often really squeezed right in the middle, obviously. But the very act of spending some time with them is positive, I think, for that group. And if you can do something to kind of up their skills or support them or coach them, because often they're the ones having the most challenging conversations, and they're the ones who will do more of the engagement in a way. So you need a group of people who are A, motivated, and B, have the skills to do that engagement. So constantly squeezing on them isn't going to help. Yeah,
and the question is, as a leader, do you know if the people that are reporting to you are actually capable of having difficult conversations? Because very often you've not been in the room when they've had one, so you don't actually really know.
Yeah. Now, I've had situations where, as part of the kind of planning, we've done role playing and that kind of thing, and I think that can be quite powerful because, well, certainly I know for myself, back in the day, the first time I had to give a conversation to somebody,
you're going to lose the job.
You're going to lose the job, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
You this is not about how good you are at your role, how well performed. It's just, I don't have that position anymore in the future organization, and those are hard conversations.
But it's the same topic, right? You slow down before you speed up, and that means, again, because what you're talking about is, are you investing enough at the front?
Yeah.
To make everything and everybody prepared before we actually can go and make this change.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, really important. And I think, a lot of organizations, like we said, are quite cash constrained these days. But this is more about time than it is anything else. I mean, to some extent, time is money. But it's more about planning properly, starting early enough, and recognizing that certain things will take time to come to fruition.
So you need more time than you think.
Yes.
We're
it's never great when you, as a consultant, you're asked to come in and say, and the go live will be this date. So okay, but where's the plan for that? So that can be a challenge. So I know one of the things you wanted to talk a little bit about was, as a leader, when are you in your productive zone and when are you in an unproductive zone? And I think indeed we've got a slide on that one.
So that there's a little bit of context as well. So this is high feds who came up with this model. So what happens is when you enter one of these territories that is unknown, so the complex or the complicated, what happens is that your stress levels will go up a little bit. And the first thing that people do is to get away from stress because we don't like it. And it's a bit like, when you go to the gym and you start working out, and you go, oh, this is really tough. You might feel the need to give up. That's a natural.
Certainly, I do.
But if you you need to be able to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. It sounds a bit. That sounds a bit double. But when your stress level rises, your immediate reaction will be to try and get away with it. So, for example, when people approach change projects, they will gravitate towards the organizational structure and the processes, because I know that, and it takes me a lot of time, and I'm really busy with it, right? And that's another reason why we often don't get to the behavioral part. It's a bit iffy, and it makes me feel uncomfortable, so I'd rather not. So yeah, but as a leader, it's good to recognize when and under which circumstances do I start to feel really uncomfortable? Yeah. And is it okay to feel uncomfortable because we're headed, into this unknown territory? Right. Or actually, am I shooting out on the top end, which is I become really unproductive in another way, which is I get too stressed out, or I walk away, or some kind of behaviors that are not fruitful.
Very visible to your organization when it's not going right as well. So, we talk about engaging people and whatnot. If they see the leader or leaders beginning to act in that almost dysfunctional way, that can be very impactful.
Right? Yeah. Because these are my leaders. They're leading me exactly. to this unknown place, and they're fighting. Yeah. But I think what is interesting is to say it's okay as a leader to not have the answers, right? When you're leading in uncertain times, what happens a lot is that the role of a leader is really changing, right? Yeah. The leader in a more traditional sense would be the person that says, this is where we're going. That's still the same, but how are we going to go there? That's now become an unknown because you've not done it before. So that means that for those of you on this live webinar that are going through changes, you will get into periods of discomfort. Yeah. And then the same as the previous model, this model is for you, but it's also for the people around you. Right. So do you know when you become unproductive on the top end? Yeah. And will your people recognize it? And what is it that you need? Yeah. And do you know that from the people that are working in your teams? If I was working with you and I was your colleague, would I know when you would get really stressed out and what that looked like?
And these aren't easy conversations by any stretch, but quite powerful if you have that level of honesty and hopefully trust then within your immediate group.
And actually, I think it's good we keep reaching back to almost the same example as well. So let's say you are going to outsource, then to have the conversation, to have this type of conversation with the people involved in the project, saying, listen, there will be times during this process that people will start to feel really uncomfortable or get maybe really angry. So it's good to have a little time beforehand to say, what does that look like? And what do you need? Because once you give words to it, when it really happens, I could say, oh, Jen, I just want to check in with you because we had a discussion and you said when you're mad, you need time out. Do you maybe need a break? Yeah. Right? Yeah. That's much more helpful.
Absolutely. I think that can really actually almost transform how the project will go, right? Yeah. To use a catchphrase, of course, but I think, and it comes back to what we were saying before, having that kind of honesty is great. It may not be easily received the first time you do it, right? Because not only sometimes is this new for you as a leader, it may also be new for the organization as a whole. So they may not be used to a leader who says that kind of thing. Yeah. Also, in some cultures, the way people organize companies and whatnot, there are different ways how hierarchy is perceived. So that can be quite confronting actually for an organization.
And I think it's a beautiful message, right? Yeah. So I'm getting all perky. For me, it's a beautiful message because there's nothing nicer for me than going into an organization where change has been approached the same way for a gazillion years, and for leaders to sit down and say to their staff, so this is something new for us. Yeah. and we're going to approach it in a whole new way.
Yeah.
And that means that we're going to involve you more.
Yeah.
And this is where you do have influence, and this is where you do not. And we're all learning in this process. So you'll see something new from me. I'll see something new from you. And let's see if we can make this better than any of the changes that we've gone through before.
Yeah, and I think, so from my own experience, when you try to do things differently, it doesn't always work perfectly the first time. So when we were chatting before, one of the things you said to me is it can be really good to have someone, a trusted party in your team, or a peer, or someone who will actually sort of point out to you, hey, couldn't quite go right that time. Just think about this. That can be very, very useful.
Yeah.
But also, I like to say, keep the faith, because when you make this kind of change, it's new for the organization, and it also takes people a moment to adjust to a different style.
Yeah, when you go to the gym for the first time, it feels really uncomfortable, but if you stick with it after a while, you'll see the results, right?
Yeah. So talking about how you actually deal with some of this, we have a last slide, which is our last sort of slogan, and that's it's about the decision process, and that's so what really, really practically then, as a leader, you say you want to do this and so on. How do you actually do it? How do you deal with those sort of uncertainties and still be effective? So you have some advice for us there.
Yeah, one is about decision making. So, you know, when you're headed into this unknown territory, so the complex or complicated one in the model, and your stress levels are up, and you're hopefully hanging in the zone of being productively uncomfortable, then there's something around, you have to make decisions. And very often in organizations, we're used to making decisions and we go, this is A and this is B.
Yeah.
Okay, it'll be A. And now the trouble with things you've never done before is you cannot predict the future.
No.
So that means that it's hard to make list A and B and then make a decision.
Right.
And what happens a lot then is that people freeze.
Yeah.
And then normally I tell a fable of a horse, the horse with the two haystacks. The short of the fable is, the horse comes out of the barn and sees two haystacks, and he's like, oh, should I eat this one or that one? Oh, this one has more clover, that looks really nice. Oh, but this one is actually more. So he compares and compares and compares, and then he actually doesn't make a decision and goes back into the barn. And this would repeat for a couple of days until
he becomes a hungry horse.
A very hungry horse. So that, you know, is not a good thing. Or so what I normally advise leaders is, if you find yourself in that place, which is a difficult place, it's about the decision process, not about the decision itself. So it's better to move and to readjust than to not move at all.
Yeah, because that freezing situation actually just doesn't just cost you time, it ultimately costs them the money as well. And you really see people rabbit in the headlights, basically,
That's also because very often we say to leaders that you have to have the answer.
Yeah,
but that's
how they've grown up.
I know, but you're not Superman or Superwoman, even though you might like to be. You're not. Well, you're not. You're not this ideal character, and the pressure I think on leaders is very high nowadays. On like, you're not allowed to make a mistake, but it's all right.
Yeah,
we learn from mistakes, right? So for me, it's
the key is that you learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's like I'm in my house and I want to go to the barn and it's dark, and I know I want to go to the barn, but I don't know exactly how to get there because it's dark. So I'm gonna put my light above my head and I'm going to see where my floor is, and I'm gonna take a step.
Yeah.
And then I can readjust along the way. So I would advise the decision process. So for me, this decision process is something like, I'm going to speak to 3 different people, or I'm going to take X amount of days, or maybe a combination of those. Yeah. And you write that down and you just make sure that you go through those steps and then you make a decision.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really powerful, I think. And for, if we've got people on the call who are not necessarily the leaders, but they may be working with leaders, that's also something useful. You know, if you talk about what kind of agenda would you want in a steering committee meeting or so, well, actually have a real process how you're going to approach things, and then you can help people get through there.
It's like an agile way, right?
Yes.
It's better to move, adjust, move, adjust, move, adjust.
Exactly. Yeah, we would say plan, do, check, adjust, and I think it's super relevant.
Yes, indeed. So there was some questions coming in while you guys were, deep in your discussion, and I thought I did not want to disturb your flow.
Yes.
So kept it in the back. So the first question is from, well, I'm not sure who this is. It's an anonymous question, but he or she definitely, I think, enjoyed our webinar so far. And the question is this: I work with very technical people with little focus on leadership and behaviors. Can you elaborate a bit more on the way you apply a model to get them on board?
Okay, so this is somebody looking for a bit more on this 5-step model thing.
Yeah. I call it the organizational capability model. I bet you if you Google that, you'll get plenty different of, there's different versions of it out there. But I basically use 5 different buckets. So one bucket is organizational structure. One bucket is processes. One bucket is people and skills, so the number of people. And then one bucket is culture and behavior, and one bucket is leadership. And I would say is for any change, whether it's in finance or out there, if you want to make something happen, you should be pressing more than one of the buckets. If you would see it as a button, you would be pressing more than one of the buttons in order to make a change happen.
Right. Yeah.
So let's say you want let me give a totally different example. If you want to change something in health and safety, people go, oh, we have lots of issues with health and safety. Let's go and add HSE advisors. That's a structure bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Doing that alone isn't.
It's not going to get you there.
No, probably not. And then they go, okay, well, maybe you need to do something with processes, which is we're going to measure how many incidents we have, but also we're going to reward when you don't have, or maybe we're going to fire people when they break the rules, right? And then you go, okay, well, but we also need to train people to say, well, this is, you need to wear a helmet when you walk here, or you need to wear safety shoes when you go here, right? That's for me, that's a skill or capability.
Yeah.
But then there's also something around culture, right? Which is if I see you do something, I should say, hey, Jen, I really care for you. Could you please put your helmet on, right?
Yeah.
Or your seatbelt. And then the leadership bit would be is if a leader then visits a place, do they talk about it?
Yeah.
Yes or no? So for me, it's about if you want to make a change happen, if you only press 1 or 2 of the buttons, I will almost guarantee you that your likelihood of implementing it is low.
Yeah.
So for the person on the call is there's basically 2 ways, right? So one is to use the model and say, what are the actions that we have planned? And then you see probably that the 2 buckets on culture and behavior are empty and saying, that's weird, what should we be doing there?
You know what I really like about the model, as you've explained it, is that you call out leadership separately.
Yes.
Because I think sometimes people think, oh, we're the leaders, of course we're going to do it right. No, you need to be conscious in what you're going to do.
Yeah, the change is not over there.
Exactly. It change starts with
now
you
I'm
guys,
showing my
right?
age. What Michael Jackson say? I'm
Yeah.
starting with the man in the mirror.
Yeah.
It's good to talk about that for sure. And the reason that it doesn't happen very often as well is it makes people feel really uncomfortable.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So
you have to be more vulnerable than you would otherwise.
Yeah. So but so for the person that asked the question, one is the model, right? And then the other thing is. I don't know what your role is, but there have been times in my career where I was the change specialist, or now when I get called in as a consultant, it always makes me laugh a little bit when people don't want to follow my approach, because then I'm like, oh, I'm not telling you how to close your books every month. So
no, I do that.
Don't tell me like what the best approach should be.
Yeah. And any tips? Say you're working with somebody who's experiencing that. But the first thing they need to do is get people to even acknowledge that doing an exercise as you described would be valuable, or getting, even just a tiny bit of time from somebody like you. How to bring people on when they really don't recognize that component of what you're doing.
Yeah. So for me, what I've seen a lot is that when you have a conversation, conversations take down in different levels.
Yeah.
And what happens is very often they get stuck on the content level. I think we should do something on behaviors, and you say no, and then you get this oppositional conversation, right? But there's something underlying, which is there's a belief. So the people that you're talking about honestly believe that there's no need to do anything on the behavioral front. Right. So then talking about it in another way, which is not having the conversation, but talking about the conversation.
Right.
Like saying, I've noticed that every time we talk about the behavioral bits, you seem to be dismissive or upset about it.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about what's going on in your mind.
Why do you
What
why
is
is
that?
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then don't have that conversation in
Not
a
in
room
public,
with bad
no,
lighting
no.
also, but
Yeah.
go for a walk and get a coffee
Yeah.
and say, tell me a little bit more about your previous experiences with change, or hey, you know, do you feel that when we tell people what to do, they just do it? Or
It's a good idea to change setting, actually. I like that because you have a different conversation
Yeah,
if the environment is just a
yeah,
bit changed up.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, walking is the best way to approach a difficult topic.
Yeah, you also don't need to look people in the eye,
Right.
right? That's anyone with a teenager will know that one, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I hope that question has helped, or that answer to that question has helped people. But you can always contact us for
Yeah.
more info. But let's take another question when we.
Yeah. So this is from Dev, and the question is this external territory Stacy model is showing interesting segmentation. I feel the major constraint is managing time and human EQ. So I guess that's the emotional quotient. Yeah. I think more weightage is given to time over EQ. Can you show or throw some lights on this?
Okay, so
I need to clarify this. So the the slides are in a horizontal section, right? But the model is actually a square. So I haven't weighted the stakeholder bit differently than so that's maybe one clarification.
Yeah.
But the question was, can you read it again? Because it was about EQ is weighted.
So I think it's within this. How do you get people to spend the right amount of time in our language on the softer stuff as on the harder stuff?
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody once told me when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and my hammer is HR. So I think it should be equal parts, right? Because your change will stand or fall with the acceptance of the change. So
and if you're not HR,
yes,
if you get them to spend any time,
it's good time
on the behavioral piece, that's a win in my book, because typically the kind of changes I'm involved in are very heavy on the technical component. There's a ton of stuff to do, whether we talk about process, data, tech, whatever, so controls. If you get them to spend any time at all, that is a plus, because it's so often overlooked. And if you get them to spend any time on the behavior piece, and within that leadership piece, massive.
Yeah, massive.
That's a massive win, I would say. I mean, that's just based on my experience.
Yeah.
I mean,
But also depends on how big the company
is,
and
the culture of the company.
So I am now consulting with a company that has 9,000 people and 40,000 contractors.
Yeah.
And involving them in a change involves roadshows and engaging people in these sort of sessions where they get to co-create stuff, and that will take 3 weeks.
Yeah.
If you have a company of less than 100, you can do it in a day.
Yeah, exactly. It's about scale, it's about complexity. How many different verticals do you have, and therefore what kind of skill sets of people?
I guess the message of this webinar is more around don't do nothing.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Next question, would we?
Yeah, this is from Daniel. And he's asking, how do you handle leaders that are too busy to change?
Right.
Oh, sorry.
Too many of that, no?
I think Daniel may come from a similar background as you and I.
Yes.
So
busy to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't believe in that. Too busy. It's a choice, right? People make a choice.
I think it comes down a little bit to what you were saying about productive and unproductive, right? Because people who are too busy to change, they're often very busy on the bits which is in their comfort zone.
Yes, I'm so busy reorganizing and drawing the boxes.
So, I don't have time to do it in a different way. I mean, I think, I'll let you say a few words in a minute, but I would tend to come back to your model that you talked about, sort of evaluating what's in your plan, which of those 5 components you're hitting or not, because I think typically if you're, well, I know myself, if you're very, very busy, you need it marked out clearly for you. Okay, then I need to take an action in space A and space B. Okay, let's get on, let's do it. Yeah. But having that structure and way of approaching it and way of closing the gap, I think that's one thing. And the other thing for me is it's about performance. So, and it's linked to the same thing. People who are busy are usually also wanting really to be secure on their performance delivery.
Yeah.
you miss these things, you're going to underperform.
Yeah.
And nobody, I mean,
And nobody wants that.
you don't get rewarded for being a busy underperformer, right? It's just business reality. So I don't know. I mean,
I was smiling about the question because my first thought was, if a client approaches me and they tell me beforehand that they don't have time, I don't take them as a client because I know I will never succeed, right? So that's the beauty
totally.
of having your own company.
I mean, I've had a situation where I worked with a client and they said, but you're making us busier or giving us more work than before. Well, yeah, you're doing something as a project in addition to your operations. The consultant can't come in and do the totality. It will always require something from leaders, something from the organization.
So with the too busy comment, I would always go for the planning approach, which is, even if we start in a month, let's plan some time now to spend time on it.
Yeah.
And book that in your calendar.
Yeah.
There's something about safeguarding your time, or you could book time with that person in the calendar and say, well, this is, you think you have a meeting with me, but I'm giving you time to think about something.
Yeah. I've also done the thing where you basically spoon feed them. So you give them the tools to do what they need to do. Yeah. And that can come down to even drafting the email, drafting the agenda. Sure. They don't need to do that if they're very, very time pressed, because sometimes you do come across leaders, if you're working with somebody very, very senior, they literally have very little time, even though their heart may be totally in it.
Maybe the other thing that was resonating for me when we're talking about this was, when I said in the beginning, you have to really engage people.
Yeah.
If you as a leader really don't believe that that's the right thing to do, then don't do it, because it will show.
It will look very inauthentic. Yes.
Fake. Yes.
Yeah.
Which might do more.
Harm than good.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think that kind of answered the next question, but I'm going to read it out anyway and see if you have anything else to add. So someone asked, can the person in the mirror be an effective leader if they do not believe in the necessity of the change? And I think you kind of mentioned
that's what you were just saying, isn't it?
No,
probably
not. Because I think that leaks, right? And I can't actually explain it, but you've probably been somewhere where you've heard people talk with gusto about something and you're like, I hear the word, but I don't feel it.
Yeah.
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 But then, if I was working with them, I would always go and dig into why. So what's going on there that makes this person feel this way or believe this way? Have they had experiences before that made them believe that this is not going to work, right?
Yeah, and I think also inquire, not necessarily to that individual, but to the line manager of that individual. So what are you expecting from them?
Yeah.
In a way, how are you allowing them to not perceive this as necessary?
Yeah.
If you have access to that, and that would work in some cultures, that doesn't work.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, next one, Winnie.
Yeah, probably our last question, just conscious of time.
Yeah.
From Lindsay. So when going through change, how do you know when you have really got, arrived or got there? And can you share? Yeah. And can you share examples of how you can shift mindsets to change behaviors?
Okay, so I'm going to give a hard answer first, and then you can come with it. So measurement. Yeah. Finance
survey.
Well, so before you are underway, you define how you're going to measure that you have reached the right level of adoption and utilization. How you get there will be a mixture of hard stuff and softer stuff. I mean, even hard stuff I call training and making sure everybody has the right access and whatnot. But you need some sort of measurement of the other stuff, I think. That's how I would approach it, because, well, I mean, it's a bit my background.
No, I believe in the measurements as well, but you'd feel it as well.
Yeah. If you have a better level of intuition than me, you probably feel it.
No. So I think hard measures are always great, right? So that's nice.
Some things are so difficult to measure.
I was more thinking about let me give you an example. So there was a finance leader, and she basically said, oh my gosh, all these people are coming to me and my team for decision making, and I'm so tired that they come to me for decision making, because then I gotta do all their work and sign off. And then I have to do my work, and I'm working really long days.
Yeah.
I want to move accountability lower down the line.
Right.
Like, okay, that's a behavior shift that you want.
Yeah.
And I always say, saying it doesn't make it so.
No.
I want you to take accountability. Like, it doesn't work that way.
No.
So she basically said, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my accountability for signing things up to a certain level of value for 2 weeks to the team, and they're gonna be. This was a lady that gave out loans, so I'm gonna assign everything under $2,000. You do that yourself, and then after 2 weeks we compare, and I go, would I have made the same decision in this case, yes or not? And then we go, oh, in 80% you would have made the same decision. Oh, that's great. Oh, why? And the 20% not.
Yeah.
Find out, and then you experiment your way into a behavioral change, right?
Nice. I like that example. Yeah. I can see how that would work. And there was a second part to that question, which can you just repeat it? Something about mindset or behaviors or something?
Yeah. So it's examples of how you can shift mindsets to change behaviors.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it depends which behavior you're
trying
to change.
Yeah. So I think, for example, working together, right? One of the things that you can do to make people work better together is to let them get to know each other more personally.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that that's a waste of time, but I can recommend that it's go, hi, I'm Tessa, hi, you're Jen, let's work together. It's very Western European. And then, we hit some kind of snag and we have nothing to bank on because I don't know about your values, I have nothing. So that's one.
And it wouldn't be a webinar of 2022 if we didn't talk about hybrid working at some point. We haven't mentioned it yet, but I think that can exacerbate it, right? So, I mean, when we've been chatting before, we've talked about how do you do some of the engagement and all the things we talked about when you're working hybrid versus not. And I think it's being very selective on when are the moments to actually come together, when are the moments where the human interaction really will exponentially help you. And I think this is probably one of those examples in a way, because it's like, how are you supposed to work with someone you have literally never met?
Yeah.
I mean, I've led a team before, global team, and it took more than 1 year before I even met everyone in the team.
Yeah, that's difficult.
That's
and there are
hard.
tools and approaches you can use to get to know each other a little better, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to change a behavior like working better together, then you do something on the process side and you do something on the reward side. I'm rewarding for working together, and then you try different things. So one is, let's try to get to know each other a little better, or hey, let's try calling each other when we don't really need something from each other, or you have to kind of experiment your way into what works in your organization.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're probably going to have to wrap up with time. If we will take a lot of the questions that have been asked, and if there's anything which we haven't had the chance to answer, we'll try and do that offline. But as it goes for today, thanks very much for those questions. They were good ones, very insightful, allowed us to think a little bit, which was good. So we've enjoyed that, and I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. So we would like very much to stay in touch following this webinar, and if we're not already connected on LinkedIn, I think we can move to the last slide where we have a few bits of information. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, please do send us a connection request. And on LinkedIn, you can also follow the company Loughridge Transformations, and that way you'll stay up to date with blogs, webinars, and the other content that we share. So our next webinar, that's scheduled for September the 1st, and more details of that will be available throughout the summer, and that will be on our website and in LinkedIn. If you'd like to send us an email, you can do so. Our email addresses are on screen, and we've also included the links to our meeting scheduling tool if you'd like to have a bit of a chat with either of us. Please don't hesitate to do that. If there's anything we've said today that's piqued your interest and you'd like to explore it a little bit further or understand it a bit more, we're more than happy to chat. So today we've been discussing the role of leadership in transformational change, particularly in the complex environments that we experience these days. But if you want to learn more about our methodologies, our ways of working, if you've got any of the kind of changes that we've talked about in finance, outside of finance, or some things we haven't mentioned, but especially if behavioural change is a crucial element of it, or you've done a change and you haven't got the return that you were expecting, we talked about that as well. Maybe we can have a conversation about where we could bring our expertise to bear and help you actually get the value out of the change. Right. So the other thing is that both Tessa and I, we do one-to-one coaching. We work with individuals on either leadership, continuous improvement, or personal development journeys. And Tessa even has her own program, which she's designed, and you can get more information on her website about that or by giving her an email. Last of all, we have an active blog at Loughridge Transformations, and we've included a few links here to blogs which you might find interesting. So after today, please keep your eyes open for some follow-up emails from us with the recording link, a survey that we showed the code to earlier, and some further information. And if you don't see anything in your inbox, please do remember to check your spam folder. We really appreciate you filling out the feedback survey. Webinars are still quite new. I think this is number 5. So it's still quite new for us, and we value the feedback. So with that, I'd like to wish you to stay healthy and safe. Thank you again for your time, and I look forward to seeing you at our webinars later in the year. Thank you again.